really about the pain points, what you're going to get into. I don't have a whole lot in the demo area. More, we're just going to kind of discuss from my experience the pain points that you run into when you apply USGCB and FDCC security settings. Okay. All right. My name is Vince Johnson from Microsoft. I'm a Premier Field Engineer out of the Washington, D.C. office. If you guys are not familiar with Premier, Premier is an extension of the support arm of Microsoft. If you don't have a Premier contract in your organization, you need to get one. You need to get one. You get cool guys like me to come on site and help you with your stuff. I'm an infrastructure guy. Most of the stuff I do is security related, Active Directory, that kind of thing. So, again, this is my first time speaking at Tech Ed, so take it easy on me. All right, so we're going to get started here. Implementing a security baseline in your environment. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so when I talk about a security baseline, what I'm talking about are a set of settings that you apply to your desktop, or could be to your server as well, that are going to change or increase the security posture, the overall security posture of your desktop. So there are already some security baselines created for you. Other organizations have created some. Microsoft has some in their security guides, right? But NIST is the one that we've been working with the most in the federal government. NIST has created FDCC, which covers Windows XP and Vista, and then USGCB. FDCC stands for Federal Desktop Core Configuration. USGCB is the United States Government Core Baseline. You also have DISA, but their stuff is a little bit, they really haven't gotten to the point of actually creating GPOs for you. They have more like written advice on how, or recommendations on how to secure your desktops. But with a little bit of work, you can turn that into a GPO, and then you can apply it to your organization. Microsoft has several baselines with their security guidance, and now we have a new tool. Well, it's not really new, but Security Compliance Manager that you can use to pull those security baselines in, or these Microsoft recommendations, create a GPO, or apply them locally, and then get them to into your organization. And then when I say your baseline here, I'm talking about just in general a baseline, right? Because what we're going to talk about is what is going to break when I increase the security posture of my desktops. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that breaks, okay? All right, so the main thrust of this thing is we need your users to run as standard users. That's the most important thing. If they're going to be running as local admin, none of this matters, okay? We want the users to run with the least amount of privileges in case they do run into like some malware, something along that lines, because if they get malware as the least privileged user, then the damage is going to be less, right? If they're running as local admin and they get hit with a virus or something, the whole machine is at the virus's disposal. So you got to be careful there. Also, there are going to be some application development implications. So the people that are writing your apps have to change the way that they write their apps, because we don't allow a lot of these baselines for you to write to specific areas. Registry, C:\Windows. That kind of thing, right? So the biggest thing in my experience rolling these out is you need a really seasoned project manager, because you're going to have a lot of oars in the water at the same time. All kind of organizations within sub-orgs are going to be trying to help you get this thing going. And you need somebody that knows the organization and can get the people lined up and working properly, meeting their milestones in a timely manner. Issues with management, app dev, remote users, network, help desk, end users. In my experience, the political side of changing or increasing these security settings is really tough, because once the users find out that they can't run their favorite stock ticker anymore, oh man, you got to fight. I remember one time I was working with, well, no names. It was a while ago, but they were going from 98 to 2000. It was basically the same type of thing where we were forcing them to go into a standard user configuration. And once the word got out to the users, man, that thing shot up to the CIO, came back down right on top of my head, boom. He's like, everybody stop, because I can't run my stock ticker no more. It's like, are you serious? So politically, you have to be on top of it. Communications is key. You need to tell everyone what's going on, give them time to digest it, and understand that we're about to make changes. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, I'm missing something here. Okay. My slide deck doesn't seem right. Anyway, okay, this slide is talking about, and I haven't even gotten to this yet, but okay. Once you apply your settings, you need to be on top of what the changes are. So you need to have like a before shot, you need to have after shot, and you need to understand what changes are going on and be on top of your changes. And basically what this slide is saying is you need to get yourself a tool with which you can do your security compliance, validating. You need to validate that the settings are in place. And here are some of the companies that actually write some of these SCAP tools, or what we call SCAP, Security Content Automation Protocol. They're tools that you use to verify that the settings are in place. One of the ones that I first used was, what's the name of that thing? From ThreatGuard. Secular Prime, that's what it was, Secular Prime. And that was the easy one, because and the problem was at the time, my first time doing one of these projects, we didn't have anything to count and see where we were. So we went out to the website, and the federal person I was working with just used their credit card, and we bought a quick tool just so we could do our testing. But all these other organizations also have tools. Microsoft using SCCM with DCM can be used. Okay. So another thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to do a full assessment of the client, right? You need to know what's on the client before you get started, because you got to be aware if the settings don't get applied, then you need to understand what the behavior is. So like when you're troubleshooting, if the settings are not getting applied, you need to understand what the behavior is so that you know, hey, the settings are not being applied. I'm not seeing the settings come through. And then we got to figure out why the settings are not coming through. So you want to document your local group policy settings. And then you need to get your before shot, So, because we want to know, we want to see where we were in our compliance level before. And then once we get our settings in place, we want to know where we are after. And then we can talk about the difference and figure out what we want to do. Because we still have to go through applications testing, right? And the big thing is determining what's going to break, because the biggest part of this project is testing your applications. It's going to take the most time, it's going to be the most strenuous, and it's going to be the most costly as well, because you might have to end up replacing some applications. So you need to understand your GPOs or how they work. GPOs, of course, come in, there's two parts to a GPO. There's a user part and a computer part. These USGCB and FDCC settings actually have user and computer parts. So you need to understand what settings, where your computer objects are so that you can properly apply your settings. I've worked with some customers where their OU structure was really weird, and you had to make special arrangements for applying your settings. So sometimes we had to separate out the GPOs and apply them to different parts of the OU structure. So this is what actually, with the USGCB, there's actually 7 GPOs that you're going to be implementing. With FDCC, there are a total of 9. There's 3 that are general for FDCC. Then there's 3 that are specific for XP or Vista, whichever one you're going to be using. This slide only shows the USGCB ones. And what's interesting here is that now there's a computer energy policy for Windows 7, where we didn't have that for XP and Vista. Excuse me? No, it's just shut down. I'm sorry, not shut down, but power savings. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Right. I think there's only about 4 or 5 settings in that policy. It's really small. Yeah. Okay. So, a couple things you can do to get this. A couple tools. You can use GPMC to create your GPOs. That's kind of the basic way to do it. There's also the Security Compliance Manager tool. These are Microsoft tools. Also, you may need to run a script. The Microsoft, the MSS settings and the GPMC by default don't display. So you're going to need to go out to a site and pull down this a script so you can actually view them within GPMC. So now we're ready to create our GPOs, right? So I can go out to the NIST website, download my GPOs, and they'll be in a zip format. You unzip them. Same thing with FDCC. And then I like to use Security Compliance Manager because it's a really neat tool. I'm going to show it to you here in a little bit. And it also comes with another tool within it called Local GPO, where if I don't have a domain, I can apply my settings locally, and I can still keep my testing going, right? So I don't have to create an AD structure, but it does make it easier. In my experience, like when you're in a test lab, a lot of times they don't have the proper structure in place. So you using a local GPO will keep your project moving. You don't have to stop or create a AD structure. Also, SEM is going to require SQL Express. That's the downside to using the tool. Although in the newer version, which I'm not going to show you today, because it's still in beta, and it's still got a few bugs in it. But you have to install SQL Express with the tool. And then, the thing that's really cool about the tool is that, and I'll show you as we get into this, but per setting, you're going to get advice on why we're setting this particular way, okay? Which is, to me, really, really valuable, because you're going to get into these heated discussions over why we should be setting stuff and why not. I'll leave it there. Okay, so let's take a look at the Security Compliance Manager real quick. Okay, so it's a free download. You can just go on the web and search for Security Compliance Manager. I think this is version 2. And I've already pulled in a few baselines. Okay. So when you install the tool, by default, what it's going to do is it's going to pull down all the Microsoft guidance and automatically install it into your tool. And that's going to be the Microsoft guidance baselines, right? So you'll have that stuff to work with right away. The only problem is, it's not really a problem, but the way that this is set up is those baselines are read-only, okay? So in order for me to actually use them, I have to make a copy of it, edit the whatever setting I want, and then export the GPO, or however I'm going to do it. So let's say we look at, let's take a look at FDCC. This is one for, I think it's for XP, or XP and Vista. Okay, so what you're looking at here are actually the settings that are in this particular GPO, okay? So here we have the account lockout policy, password policy, and then the actual settings for those over here. So when we go into the actual settings, if you look down at the bottom here, you notice that now I'm getting description information, right? It's telling me about the setting. It's telling me what the threat and the countermeasure is for that particular setting, which is really good information because once you get into your heated discussions about this stuff, now you got some ammunition to say, hey, this is why we're doing this, right? Because what you find is that a lot of times, at least in my experience, you get people that kind of know what they're doing, but they really don't know, right? And then they start spouting off information. But especially, I see this a lot in the federal government. And they're not quite on the head with what they're talking about, but now we have the information, so it's like there's no debating really after that. So we get the vulnerability. It tells you what the vulnerability is, the potential impact, and then the actual countermeasure. And then we take a look at the definition. This is where we can actually make the change. So the thing is, though, you're going to have to test all this stuff. FDCC is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 settings. USGCB is almost close to 5, if it's not 500 settings. So there's a lot of testing that has to go on here. If you don't test this stuff and roll it out, you're going to break stuff. There's no doubt about it. So you got to be on top of your testing. So if we take a look at another one here, let's see. USGCB account, no, let's read it that one. Windows 7 user settings. Okay, so here are all my user settings within this particular baseline, or, well, actually it's a GPO that was imported. And let's take a look at a couple of settings that I know are problematic. Let's go to FDCC security settings. Okay. If we go into security options, and then under security options, and this is where we run into FIPS. FIPS is going to be under security options, and that's definitely a real problematic setting. That particular setting, like I said, I have not seen one organization implement that particular setting. And the reason being is because it breaks a lot of the legacy connections to your, like Samba, AIX, and that kind of stuff. Those connections, unless you upgrade the client end of that, FIPS is going to break that. Another big one is LAN-man authentication level. By default, these baselines, of course, we want to raise the security as high as possible. So they're setting NTLM to version 2. So if you have legacy stuff in your environment, another break. Okay, stuff is. This particular one, I'll generally have to set back to yeah, something like NTLM response. I'm sorry, NTLM. So I'll say you do NTLM version 2 if you can, but if not, fall back. Okay. All right. So more information in here. So if we take a look at say some of the things that you can do with Security Compliance Manager. So here is where I can actually import a baseline. Baselines come in a .cab format, right? Which a lot of times you're not going to find your baselines in that particular format. So sometimes you actually have to create them yourself. Or if it's in a format of a GPO, then I can just simply import the GPO. Also, what's cool about this is once I get my settings in place and I create my GPOs, I can actually export all that information out to an Excel spreadsheet, because always in these situations, you're going to have documentation, right? Because generally, you're going to have auditors coming through. They're going to want to know what you're doing. They want to see what you've done. So creating an Excel spreadsheet from this is really, really good way to appease the auditors. Okay, so also another cool tool within here is my merge and my compare. For a long time, we had issues at Microsoft with being able to compare GPOs. Like I walk into a situation where, you know, they've already got GPOs in the environment, but a lot of times they don't know what they've done. You know, so they say, Vince, can you tell us, or can you tell us the difference between these GPOs? Okay, like because you're going to need to know if there are any settings that are in conflict, right? So using this compare tool is really, really neat because I can actually output the difference between two GPOs. Merging GPOs is a really cool tool. I can, or my baselines. Like I can take all the FDCC GPOs, all the USGCB GPOs, combine them into one. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but you can do it and then apply, you know, send out one GPO. So it's a really neat tool. If you haven't had a chance to play around with it, I suggest that you try it out. All right. All right, so that's basically SEM. I'm going to move back over. Okay. So next thing we're going to need to do is we need to perform a full application inventory. I haven't been to one customer yet that when I go into the meeting and I ask them, well, how many applications do you have? I haven't had one customer yet get that number right. Every time they go in, they always underestimate the number of applications they have. And the other thing about it, too, in this process, you may be cause or bringing to light a problem within the organization, okay? Because the way that they procure their applications or the way that people are bringing applications into the organization, they may be circumventing, you know, processes, and all this stuff comes to light. So, yeah, sometimes you have to be careful of how you do your application inventory. Also, too, you need to get your in-house devs involved because there's going to be a change in the way that they need to write their applications, okay? We have a prescription on that. Stuff like writing, like I said, writing to the file location, writing to the registry is usually going to be a no-no with, when you're doing these types of engagements. You got to stand firm on your security settings because people are they're going to be moaning and crying. My application's broke. Please, can you take those settings off? No. No. We need to get an upgrade, all right? We need to talk to the vendor. We need to figure out why the application is broken, okay? I've got a couple slides later, we'll talk about actually remediating the applications. But we need to find out why it's broken, okay? Because maybe the fix is maybe really simple, right? Because what I find with these engagements is that you end up poking holes in the security to regain functionality. So, for instance, writing to, say, HKey local machine, current control set, some place down in there, right? Application may want to write to some place down in there. So what you'll do is you'll find out where it's trying to write, and there's a couple tools you can to run to figure out where it's trying to write to. And then you can just say, let's go specifically to that key, and then give the proper permissions on that key. And then the application will start to function again. Okay, so find all your applications, and I had one customer, we set very first meeting, they said, okay, well, how many applications do you have? One guy says, 300. Oh, no, 500. I'm like, wait a minute now. That's a pretty big difference, right? So we appoint a team to actually do the application inventory, and we find out they have over 1,200 applications. We're like, holy crap. 1,200? Are you serious? And then once you go through the list, you find out Harvard Graphics 3, 1989, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. So you got to scrub the list, and we got to figure out what's going to go through actual testing. It was some of the applications you find is Barbie, you know, like, hold on, this is the enterprise. Okay. All right. Yeah, my slide deck is out of order. But anyway, the OU structure, like I was talking about before, you need to have a good understanding of how your OU structure is set up because we need to know where the computer objects are so we can properly apply the GPOs in the right place so we can get the desired effect, okay? The goal here is that we want to get the security as high as possible. See, generally what I see when I go into these engagements is I go in, I say, give me one of your desktops that's already, you know, with your freshest image. And generally I want someone that's been working with for a little while. I take my tool, and I always tell them you got to get a SCAP tool so I can do my security compliance testing. And I run, and I get my before shot. I take a look at that. And generally what I see is security compliance in the neighborhood of like 50 to 60%, right? Then we go in, we put on our tools, our GPOs, and then we run it again. And then we start hitting like in the 90, 95 percentile range, okay? The problem is when we start getting 95, 96%, man, stuff is broken. So now we got to start testing, okay? So next thing we need to do is get our test lab built. It's going to be real important to get your test lab built as early as possible. In my experience, it's best to use a separate forest, but on the same IP network, because that way I can keep my back-end stuff, right? I don't have to recreate mail or databases or anything like that in the lab. I just pass credentials, right? So it makes it easier. And then we can synchronize our lab to production. So to synchronize the lab to production, we'll use this tool within GPMC, create XML from environment, create environment from XML. And basically what these scripts do, and they have all kind of parameters, right? So I can say, give me the users, the groups, or whatever. And it creates, it'll output the XML with all that information in it. And I take that file, take it to the lab, and I run the create environment from XML, and then it populates my AD. So I can have, but it's just a snapshot though, right? You have to keep doing this if you want to keep your lab in sync, because it's just a snapshot of what you have at that time. Then I build my GPOs. Okay. In my experience, using virtual machines is generally the best way to go. It's the easiest. It's the least amount of lifting, right? You could use physical machines, but it becomes really cumbersome. Virtual machines, though, it's better, but there's still issues with that as well because someone's got to build a virtual machine. Like one of my first projects, the building of the virtual machine held us up for like a month. I started to tell the guy, just give me that and let me do it. You're taking too long. You're holding this all up. So, but then once we got the VMs built, we just stuck them on thumb drives, and like this particular customer was like really geographically dispersed. So they were all over. And so we put them on thumb drive and just mail them out to people, right? Test your application. Tell me how, what's going on. So what we did with those VMs was we had a client on that VM to join our lab domain, and then they got the GPOs, okay? We could have went with applying the settings locally, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be more in control of it, right? Okay. So then once we get our testers with all the settings on there, then we do our after snapshot, and now we're ready to start looking at the differences. We need to identify our our groups that are going to test early, our early adopters. We need to get our department heads involved. I've seen department heads halt projects because communication is key. You got to get everybody involved. If you don't get everybody involved, you're going to start upsetting people. And then projects tend to grind to a halt at that point. So keep your communications open. So once I get my settings on, I got my groups testing. Now, the first thing we're going to run into are issues with the operating system, right? Unsigned drivers is going to be number one. Another one of my customers, well, same one, very geographically dispersed customer. And they had law enforcement, fire, aviation, all these really diverse type sub-organizations that had really unique requirements. So, like mobile devices, like a big one was the sync for your phone. We didn't have a signed driver for it. It held up the project. We had to get the signed driver for it. But then after, I don't know, about a few weeks of testing, we realized, you know what? We're going to have to take an exception on this because there's just too much stuff out in the field that we don't even know about. Handheld radios, all kind of stuff. Half the stuff we didn't even know about, right? So what we did was we decided to take an exception on it. And what I mean by taking an exception on it is, and this is in the federal government, we're not going to set the setting. Here's why. And here is our plan, what we call a POAM, project, no. You got it. So we do a POAM to say, okay, we're skipping this setting now, but our plan is to get it back in. We have a plan to get it in. So I don't think they ever did get unsigned drivers in, though. What you'll see with FDCC and USGCB is that wireless is going to be disabled by default. They force you to use the manufacturer's wireless software. I'm not sure. I think they think that the Microsoft wireless software is not secure enough. Okay, so they force you to use the manufacturer stuff. And also, if you're doing Vista or XP, FDCC makes changes to a lot of the OS files, which is really, really bad because it's going to lock up stuff like regedit, NetExe, NetSH. All your login scripts are going to start breaking. So you got to watch out for that. And I already talked about NTLM. Okay, so that's another big one. All right, so another big one is cache credentials. USGCB and FDCC both set cache credentials to 2. Out of the box, I think Windows 7 is 10. I think it's the same for XP, but I'm not sure. But very rarely are you going to see any organization be able to run a desktop with a cache credential set to 2, because it really depends on the applications that are installed on the machine. If the application requires a cache credential, then you got a problem, right? Because the user's got one, you got applications got one. If you got another application, you got a problem. So had to take another exception on that one. We talked about power management. Peer-to-peer networking is shut down. So that was a really big deal too. So like out in the field where people are sharing printers and file shares and stuff, man, it was a big uproar. So you may have to take an exception on that one as well. We also saw issues on that one with NAS devices, with something that we never expected. We didn't realize it was actually a peer-to-peer, or was seen as peer-to-peer. App testing is the biggest part of this project. It's going to take up the most time, it's going to frustrate more people, and it's going to get you in more fights, okay? So you need to have an aggressive application testing plan. You got to get your app devs involved right away, and you got to do some research and find out what's available, right? Okay, if this breaks, what are we going to do, right? Oh, another big one. Get the app owners to test their applications. As an IT staff, and there's no way in the world IT staff can test an application because they don't know what the thing does. And as an IT group, you don't want to be responsible to say, yeah, this application is good. Because as soon as it breaks when we roll out, it can say, hey, you said it's going to work. Oh, my bad. So get the app owners to test their own applications. Okay. Tools to do your remediation. ACT 5.6 is a really good one. It's a client server it has a client piece. And you can run it in a couple different ways. You can say, you put the client piece on, you can have the client report back up to the server and say, okay, record what's going on. Or you can use standard user analyzer. And basically what happens is when you use ACT, what we're trying to do is we're trying to what we call shim an app, right? And what a shim is basically is just a runtime file that allows the application to do what it's trying to do, okay? So if it needs admin to install, for instance, or if it needs to write to a protected part of the file system, the shim will allow it. The problem is with the shim is you have to send it out with the application. And generally what I see when we talk about shims, it's a temporary fix. You don't want to be shimming your apps and running like that for the rest of the time. It's just, a shim is just this allows the project to keep going, right? But we need to figure out why the application is broken and see what we can do about it. Little Bug Light, the guy Aaron that was in here earlier, he wrote that app. It's really cool. You just install it. You tell it to go. You run your app. You do what you do. And then you say stop, and it kicks out a little log. And you look in there and it says, access denied. And it gives you what it's trying to do. And you go and you poke your hole in your settings. Process Monitor is another good one. It's real simple. Only thing I don't like about Process Monitor is it kicks out some huge logs, man. Those things are huge. So I like Little Bug Light easier because it's small, it's easy to run. And then Fiddler, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fiddler at all, but when you're doing your web app testing, it's going to be really good for testing your web apps. So in the federal government, we refer to applications as COTS, commercial off the shelf, GOTS, government, in-house. So we need to figure out, like, if it's a COTS app, then we need to go to the vendor and say, this app is broke. What can we do? Do you have upgrade? Is there a service pack? Do you understand that we're trying to do FTCC? And usually, if it's one of the larger vendors, they'll have a fix for you. Okay? All right. So we got to select the client image to test. Generally, client images, there's building your images is like ongoing. Like all my customers are always building new images. I got one customer, they have an XP image from 2004 that they just keep adding on stuff to, right? And then when I first started working with them, the first question they asked me was, why is Logon so slow? So once I did the history on this thing, I was like, well, you guys just keep adding in stuff. You're not rebuilding the image, right? So that's a problem. Also, it was a really big deal, and we ended up running a whole separate project just to figure out why they were logging on slow. But you find your image, and then once you select that image, you say, okay, from here on, all these settings are going to be baked into the image, and we don't have to worry about this anymore. So we have a complete image secured, so even if it's not in a domain, it's secured.
So is it better to set those settings in the image, or should you set them through group policy?
One more time, I can hear you.
Like NTLM and some of those other settings you can set through group
Okay, so the question is, settings like NTLM, is it better to do it in locally or is it better to do it via GPO? And I would say do it both, okay? Because what about the situation where the machine has been imaged, but it's not in the domain, right? So you want, I would say both. And then once you get into the domain, then of course GPO keeps reapplying. So if someone changes, it comes right back, right? But I would say both. Okay. All right. Yes, go. Right. Well, okay, the question is, how often should you be rebuilding your image? And it really depends. It depends on your organization and you know, what's going on there. I think some of my customers build images too quickly, right? Because all they're doing is adding in applications. So we always make recommendations one of the big recommendations is stop putting the applications into the image, number one, right? Let's figure out a better way to do this. So the problem is, though, this particular customer, they're still running the dreaded N-word, Novell. So they have issues with ZCM, their push tool. So to get around that, they just slap it into the image, right? So I was like, come on, let's fix the problem, right? What you guys are doing is band-aiding the issue. We're not fixing the problem. And I don't know if you guys ever deal with the federal government. That happens a lot. So we're actually starting a MDT project with them when I get back. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go out there Monday, and we're going to start building MDT server, and we're going to start using MDT to build their images from here on out. So, but yeah, it depends. Really depends on the organization. Okay, so we need to get the help desk involved because at some point we're going to have to transition this from a deployment project to operations for as a daily maintenance. So we need to get the help desk involved. I would say get them involved right away. Start having them troubleshooting issues with the OS because they're going to learn what we're doing and they're going to feel like a part of the team now, right? So you get them involved, start troubleshooting stuff like the RAS, smart card, and all that stuff. And then the guys get really smart. And then it's like, oh, you got something else? I want to troubleshoot some more stuff, So then I started giving them applications. Here, try this one, So get them involved. Watch out for your trouble tickets when you roll this thing out. Because if you haven't done your testing properly, you're going to overwhelm the help desk. It's going to be a big deal. And people are going to start complaining. So again, test, 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 and then test again. And then at some point, we need to hand this thing off to operations, right? Okay. We got to get our in-house devs, like I said before, get them involved, discuss your OS, the changes in the security and how they're writing their applications and what they need to do to write their applications to run as or to allow functionality as a standard user. The key word is standard user. FIPS breaks everything. But basically what FIPS is the Federal Information Processing Standard. And what that really is doing is it's increasing the encryption levels or the capabilities of encryption, right? So we're using higher bits for our keys and all that kind of stuff. SSL2 is going to break, no doubt about it. If you got SSL2 in your environment, you need to be getting it out, okay, because it's old and it's not secure. And if you're doing XP, FIPS is going to bring XP to XP connections, okay, which in most organizations is not really that important, but it can be. Okay. Oh, like some of the three-letter organizations actually turn off the lesser encryption capabilities in the operating system and only run with the FIPS if they can do that without breaking other stuff on the OS. Okay. All right, IE, Java, ActiveX. All this stuff is going to break because FDCC and USGCB both turn off Java, and they both turn off ActiveX. Tell me one organization that doesn't run with Java and ActiveX, right? I haven't found one yet. So we got to figure out what we're going to do about that. Your Fiddler tool will come in to help you figure out what is actually being downloaded. It's possible for you to ship these ActiveX controls with the image. It's possible to do that, especially with Windows 7. So you may want to look at that. And Java is really, really tough because in one particular customer's environment, we had like 4 different versions. And every time it was like, okay, we test this one. Okay, we got that one working. And then we go over there, and it breaks. And we're like, why is that breaking? Oh, because it's a different version. No one told me that. So watch out for Java. SSL, TLS is another pain point. FDCC does not turn it on by default. USGCB does. So watch out for TLS particularly. Don't use IE maintenance mode. When I'm talking about maintenance mode is the IE settings down in the user part of the GPO. Don't use those, okay? Those, even though they allow you to set the settings, but they're user editable. So if we're trying to be secure here, we don't want the user changing anything. If you have issues with IE7, or if you're running IE7, you're going to need to install the IE7 ADM template or ADM files. And there may be some websites where you're going to need to run compatibility mode. Okay, so test. Make sure that you're on top of your Internet Explorer settings. Trusted sites is going to be another big one. What I found in my projects is that because people really didn't want to do the application testing necessary to get to where we need to be, they would always just say, throw it in trusted sites. Because what we're talking about here, the different zones have different security levels, right? The local being the least secure, all the way out to the restricted, which is the most. So what we see is the application of web app break. Like, well, just throw it in trusted sites. But we need to figure out why, right? Let's just don't throw it in trusted sites. Let's figure out why the application is breaking. If we can fix it, then let's fix it. But if we can't, then maybe we'll do trusted sites, right? But try not to cut the corner, because every time you cut the corner, your compliance level keeps going down, 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 and we want to keep it up, 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 right? Okay. Site to zone assignment. When you're putting your your URLs into the site to zone assignment list, don't use protocol, your protocol designator. In other words, just say star.something.com or www. whatever. Don't say HTTP, because what happens is the OS only uses that particular designator that you specify in that list. So if it's HTTP and then there's also HTTPS, the HTTPS doesn't get run. So I always just leave it without a protocol designator, and then that way we do HTTP and HTTPS when we're trying to test. And don't let your users bully you, right? You got to stand firm on your settings. Have a, you need to have a mechanism for adding your sites to your trusted site list. Just don't let it be the catch-all, right? Because that's what ended up happening with one of my customers. I mean, we were doing like star.organization. It was like everything, anything that had the organization's name in it was just in the list. You know, it's like, are we really doing a service here? I mean, is that really good, right? So just be aware of that stuff. Add-ons, another big one. When I'm talking about add-ons, I'm talking about plugins, like, say, for instance, Google Toolbar, right? Adobe Toolbar. are those are what we call plugins or browser helper objects. By default, FDCC and USGCB both turn that off. Okay? So I just recently did a project to regain some of that. Which one was it that we needed to get back in? I think it was the Adobe toolbar. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to add, okay, when you go in, when you look at IE, if you go Tools, Manage Add-ons, you'll see all your browser helper objects there. Okay, so you need to know which ones are there, and then you got to figure out which ones are really necessary. And then you're going to have to go into your GPOs, and there's 3 settings you have to change. I think it's enable third-party browsers. That's what it is. So you have to enable third-party browsers, and then you have to say specifically using the CLS ID of the helper object, which you can see when you go Tools, Manage Add-ons. You have to say specifically that CLS ID added into the list. Okay? All right. Windows Firewall is on by default in both USGCB and FDCC. Okay? If you're running a third-party firewall, you're going to want to turn this off. You don't want to, because you're going to have a real mess if you run 2 firewalls together. Okay? Nothing's going to work. File printer sharing, there's going to be maybe problems with that. Admin share, a big one that I found when we put these settings on was that it broke their tool for their security scanning tool, which I think they were running McAfee's tool. But because it shuts down access to these shares and stuff, that tool broke. So be aware. Okay, firewall. Okay, I think we talked about this one already. Yeah, the key here is, again, least privileged user, standard user accounts, because none of this security stuff is not going to work if we allow any local admin stuff. So, and there's another big one, password policy. So these baselines set the password policy to, I think, 60 days. One of my organizations was at 180 days, right, to change passwords. It's like 180 days. Wow. You guys that can't remember nothing, huh? So what we did was we used an approach where we backed our way into 60 days. So what we did was we set for 2 weeks at 170 days, 2 weeks at 160 days, and we just kept backing back until we got in. And what that did was that allowed users to change their passwords, but not all at once, right? Because that's the problem, is that we don't want all the passwords to be changed at once. So that could be an issue. Or I've seen other organizations do a thing by last name, right? All the J's, we forced all the J's today, or something like that. All right. Most of the projects that I work doing these type of baselines, they always want me to come up with a backup plan. The problem is that we never use the backup plan, because if you test well and you're on top of your applications, you won't have to roll back, right? But they always want to have that safety net, right? They don't feel comfortable if they don't have that safety net. So I always come up with the rollback plan. Now, in the rollback plan, you have to realize that these settings, some of this stuff is tattooed into the machine, into the OS, specifically with FDCC, because FDCC is changing permissions on files, on the OS files. You got the auditing, system services, all that stuff gets tattooed. And what I mean by tattooed is once you remove the GPO off the machine, the settings are still there. So you got to be aware of that stuff, okay? That's really, really important in the rollback scenario, okay? Luckily, I've never had to roll back, so. All right, that's pretty much everything that I had. We got any questions from anybody? Questions get a T-shirt. Yeah, go to the mic. Go to the mic.
Deal with something called HBSS that comes through the network. Okay, and so basically
Okay, right?
Go with that. So, I mean, it sounds like FTCC, which we might have to comply with, or one of the other standards says personal firewall needs to be on that. So they're running the firewall through more of a network type, push out to our clients, and it's not the personal Windows firewall. So are you saying there should be a firewall in the system that's running, or are you saying the Microsoft's firewall?
Well, what I'm saying is that by default, these FDCC and USGCB, I'm sorry, the question is, should we be running a personal firewall, the local firewall, or
HBSS?
okay, or the host base, or, which is the third party, right? Right. So, right. So number one, don't run both of them together. Number one, don't run them both together. Number one, don't run them both together. Number two, by default, USGCB and FDCC turn on the firewall. So the first thing I would do is go in and turn it off. There's one setting, I believe it's something like standard domain under firewall. I would just turn it off. And then that way you don't have to worry about it. And once you do that, now you can chop off that whole GPO and I won't have to worry about it anymore. Okay? So that's what we ended up doing. We didn't end up applying all the GPOs because we had a third party. So we just chopped off that GPO and don't have to worry about it no more. Now, the problem with that is, too, there's another problem with that. If you're running the SCAP tool to validate your client on its compliance level, now you're going to have, your results are going to be kind of screwed up because you're not doing the firewall, right? So you're going to have more exceptions there, okay? So you're going to need another POAM as well, okay? Good question. Here you go. Question? Go.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask one for the T-shirt.
Okay, I can't hear you, though. Speak up.
I'm just going to ask one for the T-shirt.
Okay, come on.
So you talk about compliance. Well, there's different types of business. So which one of the baselines, or how do we determine the best baseline that fits our company?
Okay, that's a great question. This question is, which baseline is best for your company? And I really didn't come to that because I was trying to focus on the federal aspect of this because the stuff is already created for you. And one thing I would definitely tell you to do or not to do is don't create your own baseline, okay? A lot of this stuff has been tested for years, right? They already know the pain points. Don't go out there and recreate the wheel. Aaron Margosas does another session called Unintentional Consequences. And what that is you go out and you do your own thing against or not using knowledge that's already been created, right? So I would say I would start with the known stuff, okay? And then if you're not mandated to use it, then you can be more relaxed, right? So I would go with, if it's Win7, use USGCB, and then put as much of it on as you can. But if you have problems, now I can say, well, I don't have to put that setting because it's not a mandate, right? So use the stuff that's already out there, okay? Does that answer your question? Yes, ma'am. Oh, go.
Okay, question. In terms, you talked about not applying all the GPOs into one. And
Yes.
I can understand why. I want to know what your experience is in dealing with long log delays when the machines boot up and they're trying to apply all these GPOs and dealing with that delay time.
I haven't really seen any real delays with the number of GPOs because it's a small number, and within the GPOs, there's not a lot of settings, well, except for like the computer one, but that's really not an issue generally. But the reason why I say don't combine them into one is because when there's a problem, I know exactly where to go, right? I mean, you can do that still with one GPO if you know your GPOs really well. But in my experience, like say for instance,
Does it play into like your testing? So when you apply one at a time in your testing, or
right, exactly, and that's where I want to get at is because now I can do right. I'm doing simple, and I know exactly what GPO is causing the problem. You see, so that way if I do it all in one, then I got to be really knowledgeable on that one GPO. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm a Fed, and I was on the team that had to test and deploy FDCC.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, based on your experience, because we have a separate group in my agency that's responsible for the documentation. And they get to it when they get to it, and then they come back to us and ask us like for detailed information, and we hope we remembered and documented it well. But they always, they try to go through a risk acceptance process
Okay.
for some settings instead of trying to remediate them with the POAM.
Right.
So just wondering if you had any advice for, for our perspective dealing through that process with those guys who aren't always very technical. They're just policy oriented.
Hold their feet to the fire. That is my recommendation. Every time I do these projects, people are trying to wiggle out of doing the work. I'm like, come on, man, let's just do it and get it over with. Again, in the federal government, people
I felt like you were describing us very well. So
yeah, people don't like to work in the federal government, and which is kind of mean for me to say because my wife works in the federal government. But in my experience, they tend to shirk the actual testing and stuff. And what I find too is that if you don't prescribe specifically what to do, then they'll go, oh man, I can't figure this out. I'm tired. So you got to hold their feet to the fire, and you got to give them some prescription, specifically to say, do this. Otherwise, they'll do, whatever. So, yes, that's a good one. Or get management involved and say, hey, you get the management to say, you guys got to do this, that's another tooth you got to pull. But I understand your pain, though, definitely. Go.
Since the DISA STIG doesn't come with its own GPOs,
Right.
have you compared that to the USGCP to know what the differences are?
Actually, you know what? That tool I was showing you can do that. And that's a project that I've been wanting to do. I haven't actually done it because I've been so doggone busy lately. But that's something that I want to do. The problem is those DISA STIGs it's a PDF.
Actually, you can get it in XML form too, if that.
Yeah, well, I can't. Well, I think with the newer version of the tool I was showing you, I can consume XML. But right now, that version I can't. So maybe if once I could get into more of an automated process, I would. But I don't want to go through a PDF one by one. One of my biggest problems dealing with GPOs is looking at that screen and all those settings are right next to each other. Man, I always screw something up every time. So generally for me, I like to get someone else to take a look. I say, hey man, I created this GPO. Can you please verify it for me? But that's something I want to do. I just haven't done it yet.
Let us know when you're done.
Okay. Actually, you know what? When we do, we'll probably put it up on the web because I think I'm going to blog this. So. Unfortunately, that's my last T-shirt. But anybody else have any questions?
I have a question
Go.
for you about the people regulations.
Okay.
With implementations, what are you finding out there in the field?
Well, one thing that I'm finding with this USGCB and FDCC is that a lot of organizations that are not federal are catching wind of this thing. And because it's really good, it's helping, security-wise. I'm seeing other organizations start to implement these settings. Now, I haven't done anything with HIPAA. I can't really speak to that. However, I would love to do a project similar to what the DISA thing. I want to, at some point, I want to create the DISA GPOs. I want to create the HIPAA stuff and have all of it maybe on a blog somewhere where it could be easily downloadable and easily implemented into your organization. But I just haven't had time to get into HIPAA stuff. But I want to. Oh yeah, and it's a big deal, right? Yeah. Yes, sir. No, we need to do one. We need to do one, and I'm going to do one because actually I need some more review fodder. So my problem is I just don't have time right now. I just created a troubleshooting Windows 7 class, and it's taking off like wildfire, man. People are calling me all the time saying, I need you to come and do this class. Matter of fact, I was just down here 2 weeks ago doing a troubleshooting Windows 7 class. So, but you guys hold my feet to the fire. If you guys want my information, I got cards, and feel free to contact me, okay? Anybody else? So we got references. The reason why I keep telling people to use the NIST stuff, because the NIST stuff was created like in conjunction with the Air Force like a few years ago, and the stuff is really, it's going through Microsoft testing, it's going through Air Force testing, it's going through NIST testing, and we know where the pain points are, right? So if you get out there, and there's nothing wrong with getting out there and creating your own GPO. Actually, I kind of like that idea. The problem is, though, you may not know, you're not going to incorporate the knowledge that we've attained over those years, right? So at least start with this stuff, right? And then you can kind of, work your way through. But there's a ton of knowledge already created out there. As a matter of fact, Microsoft has we have a guy that we meet with at NIST on a regular basis to report back on issues that are found. So please leverage the knowledge that's already out there. Or you're going to end up with an unintended circumstance or a problem, right? So start with the stuff that's known. More references. And please, please fill out the evals in the back. We get paid by that stuff. And please, be gentle. Please be gentle. Yes, sir.
Every year we have a third-party secure state come in and do an internal, external penetration test.
Okay.
On a company. And this past December, our board wanted to push to get everything fixed. So they came in December.
Okay, when you say everything fixed, you mean like all the settings that didn't get in?
The NTLM, the null
Okay.
sections.
Okay, the stuff that you took exceptions on.
Well, this is like our first really big push.
Okay.
We tried before. They ran in December. Our board and our directors wanted it fixed by April 15th. Everything. That was the date they set for us. We missed the date because of all the testing. and
Right.
everything.
Right.
Seeing that we don't have a company or like someone like yourself come in and help us along.
Okay.
with our other hats, how long does it usually take for you to start the process and finish a process?
Okay.
Just so I can tell like our board or my supervisors, 'cause I actually got emails from them today asking about it, and they're wondering why these things aren't getting fixed.
Right.
And me telling them, well, we're still testing.
Right.
We're still testing.
Right.
They don't buy it. They
Okay.
want results.
That's a really good question. And basically what he's asking is, how long does a project like this take? And the very first time I did it, because it was so funny, man, the first time was I have a government counterpart, that I work with. And the guy walks up to me one day and says, hey, man, we got to do this FDCC. Bam, here it is. And I'm like, huh? What's FDCC? Right? But so basically what we did was, and I didn't realize, the time frames, like what you're talking about. And I was totally, new to the whole thing. And what we found, though, was that, again, the applications testing part of this took the longest part of time. The only reason, and we were able to, the first time I did this, I was able to complete the applications portion of this project in about 4 months' time. And that was with 600-700 applications. And the only reason why that happened was because we set up a IM that I set on for 6 hours a day, and I made myself available to the organization for like a month straight, where I would wake up in the morning, take a shower, log on to the IM, and wait for people to start asking me questions, right? And doing that, we were able to get through 600 applications in about 3 months. But it really depends on your procurement as well, though, right? Because, say, for instance, these settings break Samba, or your connection to a Samba server, right? And you want Samba, and we don't want to take an exception on it. So now we got to go out and buy the upgraded client, and we got to put it in, right? So there could be other issues there. One of the things I would tell your management is that you need to help me push the other application owners to do what we need to do to make it work, because the IT guy should not be responsible for upgrading, a Samba server or fixing some in-house application, right? So you kind of need some leverage from management. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
But with myself wearing other hats and everything,
Right.
there's no way I'm going to get it done.
Exactly. And that was all I did for 6 hours a day for 3 months. You know. So there you go.
You gotta remember though, that those rules aren't set in stone. You can get exceptions.
Yes.
With legitimate reason, and you could always push something off for however long until you have the time to do it. You don't have to apply every single setting, even on the federal level. They'll have
Right.
some level of exception.
Oh yeah, they go from like critical, extreme, high, medium, low.
Right.
I mean, they have their scale of severity,
Right.
but it's just we have almost 800 servers.
Right.
Getting how many applications to
Right.
test? If I shut off null sessions on all those servers, I got to test 800 servers, however many applications. If null session goes away, what the heck's going to break?
How are you the only guy doing all this?
I had nothing better to do one day, and my boss asked me what I'm doing. I said, not much, and so.
And you screwed up. That's where you screwed up. Hey, I'm always busy. I might not look busy, but I'm busy.
No, but I'm supposed to work with our IT security department and our application department because I do the servers. So I got to be the mediator between the two and get it resolved.
Well, see, in that scenario, I would prescribe you need a team. Number one, it's got to be a team. And then you got to get the application owners involved. In other words, you need to have regular meetings with the application owners and discuss what we're doing, and then put time frames around it, and then have management bless the time frames and have management hold those people's feet to the fire. So, but you can't do it by yourself, man. You're not gonna be, I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. It's just too much work. It's too much work.
No, it's nice. Thanks for telling me about the time. That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
looking at because, like I said, they keep hounding. Why isn't this getting done? Why is these things not going? Why are these results not showing up?
Right. Now, something else that might help you out is communicate like a weekly little letter or something, right? Send out an email saying, okay, here's the list of problems that we have, all right? And I'm working on this one here, and I'm working with this person to resolve this problem, right? And then okay, all right, we got that one fixed. Now, next week, you send out the letter, all right? You leave the one that you just fixed in there, and then you go, okay, now we're working on this one, right? And maybe this could be just a communication thing too, you know? I don't know. I would love to, where are you? Where are you out of?
Michigan.
Where?
Michigan.
Where?
Michigan.
Where in Michigan?
Lansing.
Okay. I used to live in Detroit. That's where I'm. Okay. Let me give you a card. Get a card for me, and then we can talk offline.
Cool.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody want a card?
Is there ever any ROI after implementing these baselines to figure out if any of the security metrics were lowered with the baseline implementation?
Is there any ROI, return on investment, once the settings are in place? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, certainly the federal government requires many of us to sink a lot of time and hours into it, but I'm not ever sure that they go back and figure out if the goal was accomplished. The policy was fulfilled, but the goal that prompted the policy may or may not have been accomplished.
Well, we never get into that in federal government because it's a mandate. We have to do it. So it's no, we don't get into return on investment and all that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, just go. I used to be in the Army, and somebody tell me something, do it. I was like, okay. So we never get back to, we don't do that. We don't close that circle. We don't come back generally.
Since you're not part of the federal government, but you're a vendor, does that not sound insane?
It does. No, I agree with you 100%. But the problem is, generally, we so doggone busy that we got this one done. We're on to the next thing.
You gotta look at it from the other perspective then. Is if you don't do it and you get hacked,
Right.
confidential data,
Right.
what would be the potential cost of that
Right.
outage or loss or whatever? Even
Right.
in the public or in the private sector,
Right.
you can't put an ROI on the security piece.
Right.
You say, okay, if someone steals my proprietary information, what's that financial cost burden to me?
Right.
Millions?
Right. Right. I agree with that.
But you have to.
Okay, thanks, man.
You have to look at it from the ROI perspective because eventually, if security is the penultimate goal, unplug the computer and put it in the closet. I mean,
Uh-huh.
HIPAA is very nebulous. That's the problem with that requirement. And a lot of it is addressable. Some of it's required, a lot of it's addressable. So the question is, the addressable portions, a lot of it is based on ROI. Like, it's not technically or financially feasible to implement this particular section because it's not required. It's not a mandate
Okay.
in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're always looking for, we want the most security for, we want the wisest use of our resources that provide the best security at any given point.
Right.
Now, I know that Microsoft looks at that simply because you guys are constantly reevaluating the security posture of each OS.
Right.
And making those changes, and that's very appreciated. I'm just hoping that someday the federal government turns around and says, you know, for example, we put all this new regulation in with ARA sections in HIPAA. Did we actually accomplish the goal of the policy? Because I would say you can put in all the baselines you want. I'll socially engineer your users and circumvent it all.
Right.
You know, at what point do you go back and say, did we accomplish the goal?
Right. And the only thing I can answer or say to that is, well, I would say, you know, I don't know. I would say, did we get hacked? But that's, you know.
But that's part of that federal government. But you covered more the PC side. What you brought up there is like social engineering the end users.
Yeah, there's no setting for that, right?
But there's like all the different pieces of this pie in the federal side. I don't know on the HIPAA side because I haven't dealt with it. But on the federal side, you have all the requirements that say, hey, I have to train my users, they have to sign off, and I have to continually do training with them to prevent that just as much as doing this end.
Right.
It's a big, ugly puzzle. For HIPAA, I hope it's starting to happen.
Come on. Come on. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, we're just, yeah, oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
You ensure when I install the new versions of whatever System Center or whatever,
Okay.
that the baseline that I have established will not be destroyed.
Right. Well, it's because it's GPOs. So it's not actually tied to a service like that. To the application. It's tied to Active Directory. So.
Do the new versions of the new products at Microsoft really lie with the settings that you put in place now? Or does the new product will, let's say, then a new product is based on the setting?
Man, that's a tough question, man. I'm not sure. Okay. Generally, with the new versions of the applications, we have done, or we have prescription for security for that. So, like going from Vista to Vista to Windows 7, for instance, right? There's a whole new guide for that, right? So, the only thing I can say is, I would say, yeah, I would think that it's going to be built into the product, and it would be available that way. Yeah. God damn it. Shit. All right, there we go. Yeah. Trying to get out these guys' way. Okay. All right, so what's up? You guys got another question? Oh. Okay, cool. You need the card? Okay. Excuse me, guys. Let me pull down. Let me get my bag from out here.